My name is Clara Hayes, and I'm 29 years old. For most of my adult life, I believed that love was built on patience. That if you were calm enough, kind enough, understanding enough, everything else would fall into place. That belief ended the night I realized the man I loved didn't see me as his partner. He saw me as a cushion. Ethan Moore and I had been together for almost 4 years, living together for the last 2. When we moved into our downtown apartment, the lease went under my name. Not because I wanted control, but because his credit was still recovering from what he called a few bad years. I didn't mind. I told myself we were a team. Our arrangement was simple. The rent was $1,400 a month. I paid the landlord directly, and Ethan would transfer his half, $700, to me. For a while he did. Then things changed. At first, it was little slips. "I'm short this month, babe. I'll send the rest next week." Then next week would turn into next month. When I asked gently, he'd sigh, put a hand on his forehead, and say, "Work's been slow. I'm doing my best, Clara. Why are you stressing me out about money all the time?" That was his favorite defense, turning my concern into accusation. I let it go more times than I should have. I told myself love wasn't about keeping score, but over time, the imbalance grew heavier, like holding a rope that kept burning through my hand. By March, he hadn't paid anything at all. Rent was due on the 1st. By the 5th, I paid the full $1,400 myself, again. He didn't mention it once. On the 12th, I came home from work around 6:30. Ethan was on the couch, watching some mindless reality show, eating takeout from his favorite Thai place, $40 worth, according to the receipt sitting beside his chopsticks. I sat down next to him. "Can we talk about rent real quick?" He didn't even look away from the TV. "What about it?" "You didn't give me your half this month. It's been almost 2 weeks. He sighed, long and theatrical. "I've been meaning to talk to you about that. Things have been rough at work. I'll have it soon." "When?" I asked quietly. "I just need a little time. Why are you being so controlling about this?" That word, controlling, hit me like static in my chest. "Ethan, I'm not being controlling. I'm asking about rent." "Yeah, but it's always about money with you lately." "It's not about money. It's about responsibility. We had an agreement." He laughed, a short, humorless sound. "An agreement. Clara, I'm your boyfriend, not your tenant. Maybe if you weren't so obsessed with control, we'd have less tension." I sat there in silence for a long second, the sound of the TV filling the air between us. Finally, I said softly, "I'm not obsessed with control. I'm exhausted from pretending this is normal." That night, I sat on the edge of our bed and realized something terrifyingly clear. He wasn't just behind on rent. He was rewriting the story so I'd feel guilty for noticing. I called our landlord, Mr. Ellis, a kind older man who owned a few properties around the city. "Hi, it's Clara Hayes from 4B. "Clara, hello. Everything all right?" "Actually, I think I need to terminate my lease early." There was a pause. "You sure about that?" "Yes. I'll pay the penalty. I just need out." He sighed, but kindly. "I'll send you the paperwork tonight. You've been one of my best tenants, Clara. I'll make it easy for you." When I hung up, the silence in the room was deafening. It wasn't anger I felt. It was release. I didn't tell Ethan. Not that night, not the next morning. I still made breakfast, packed my work bag, and left like any other day. But something had shifted. The apartment didn't feel like ours anymore. It felt like a place I was borrowing until I could breathe again. That weekend, Ethan went out with some friends from the office. He dressed differently. A shirt I'd never seen, cologne that wasn't his usual scent. He came home around 3 in the morning, laughing softly to himself, phone in hand. "Having fun?" I asked from the hallway. He jumped slightly, surprised I was awake. "You scared me." "Yeah, it was just a night out with the guys." "Who are you texting?" He looked at me sharply. "Why are you asking that?" "You're smiling at your phone." He scoffed. "Oh my God, you're doing it again. You're being controlling, Clara." There it was again. That word, the one he used like a knife wrapped in silk. I didn't answer. I just turned and went to bed. He followed a few minutes later, slid under the covers, and fell asleep instantly. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds between each of his breaths. Somewhere between the rhythm of his breathing and the buzzing of his phone on the nightstand, I realized the truth. I didn't need to catch him lying. I just needed to stop living inside one. By morning, I'd already decided. I'd finish out the month, then leave quietly. No fights, no drama. Just an ending that wouldn't need an explanation. I'd once thought love was patience. Now I knew patience could become permission, and I'd given enough of it. The termination agreement arrived the next morning like a clean sheet of paper, will scar. Mr. Ellis emailed it at 8:13. I signed it at 11:10 while sitting at my kitchen counter with a mug I'd had since college. The numbers were the same: 2 months penalty, move out by March 31st. The legal language felt sterile and final, and for the first time in months, my chest loosened. I didn't tell Ethan. I learned the hard way that truth in his mouth became an accusation in mine. So I began to make a plan the way you prepare for a storm, quietly, deliberately, with a small bag tucked under my bed and boxes labeled in my own neat handwriting. Finding the new place was almost a relief. It was a one-bedroom in a quieter neighborhood, smaller, cheaper, with a skylight that promised morning light I could actually keep to myself. I put down the deposit on Sunday, signed the lease for April 1st, and felt a small, dangerous thrill. A future that didn't require permission. During that week, I practiced normalcy like an actor rehearsing a scene. I made coffee in the same chipped mug. I hung my coat where it always hung. When Ethan texted that he was grabbing dinner with Jess and some people from work, I said, "Have fun," and meant it. In the store, I bought a few boxes and bubble wrap and set them on the counter like harmless objects. Each time I slid a book into a box, the apartment grew a little lighter. He changed the way he wore his hair. He started leaving a little later and coming back a little later. There was new cologne in the bathroom, woodsy, expensive smelling, and sometimes a faint perfume on his clothes that wasn't mine. At night, his phone would buzz, and he'd look down at it with a private smile, one I didn't know how to share in anymore. On a Thursday, I found a receipt tucked under a coffee mug. Small handwriting, a place name I didn't recognize, signed with an S. I almost didn't notice it, except the way the paper said the night like a punctuation mark. I slid it into my pocket and walked into the bedroom. Ethan was scrolling through his phone, eyes lit by the screen. "Who's S?" I asked, because my voice was careful and curious and not yet sharp. I wanted to be calm, to give him room to explain. He glanced up, then down, then shrugged casually like he was offering a costume of indifference. "S? Oh, Sam from the gym. We ran into each other. It was nothing." "Sam from the gym?" My tone held a question and a warning. "When did you join a gym? Since when do you care about my gym memberships?" He flicked his fingers to the screen like a magician dismissing an audience. "You're making it sound like I'm doing something wrong. You're smiling at your phone all night. You go out and you don't tell me where. You used to be the one who would come home and tell me the stupidest details of his day. What changed?" "Nothing changed." His face hardened in a way that made the apartment feel colder. "You changed. You're always on my case about money. It's exhausting." He stood up and walked out before I could answer. He called it control again, like an accusation he could hurl and then leave. I boxed up another stack of plates, the ones with hairline cracks that made me nervous, and placed them in my kitchen box. Each item packed felt like a note being struck on a piano until the chord was complete. I was leaving. There were small kindnesses, too. An offer to do my laundry, a text telling me to have dinner with coworkers because he knew I'd been working late. Those moments made leaving feel like a betrayal in itself, walking away from the good parts of someone who was, in other ways, unraveling. I kept reminding myself of the receipts, of the nights he came home smelling like perfume that wasn't mine, of the way every question about money turned into a conversation about my supposed need for control. Memory is a selective thing. It keeps saving the pieces that hurt the most. One evening, he came home flushed and animated, telling me about a coworker's promotion, his hands gesturing as if to sculpt the words. He pulled out a little takeout bag, caught my eye, and said, "I picked up Thai. I thought we could—" He trailed off when he realized he had the wrong bag. He smiled awkwardly and set a single container on the counter. "They ran out of the green curry," he said. "Sorry." I stared at the bag and thought about the receipt I'd found. The small collage of evidence formed a mosaic in my head. Receipts, late nights, private smiles, excuses about shifts and slow work. None of it was proof of the worst thing, infidelity, but enough to make the fabric of our relationship feel worn thin and transparent. I packed a small emergency bag and hid it under the mattress. I took pictures of my favorite things. The framed photo of my mother and me at the beach, the yellow scarf my sister bought on a whim. I printed a copy of the lease termination and slid it into an envelope. There is strange power in paper that says the end is coming. It doesn't scream, it just exists. A quiet, bureaucratic obliteration of a life two people once tried to build together. When I told myself I'd be gone by April 1st, I imagined the leaving as a clean break. No drama, no scenes, a single, decisive step into sunlight. But leaving is rarely clean. It's messy in the edges. The way your toothbrush sits in someone else's cup. The way shared playlists keep playing songs that now feel like evidence. I practiced indifference as best I could, though sometimes in the kitchen, alone with the sound of my own hands, I let myself wonder if I'd been too harsh. Love, even when it's the wrong love, leaves ghosts. On March 18th, he left for a girls' night out. That was his text anyway. He looked nice, hair arranged just so, a dress he'd never worn in the time we'd known each other. When he closed the door behind him, I made a mental note of the way his shoulders softened in the silence. I reheated something for dinner that tasted like a life I was trying to let go of, then sat at the table and wrote a list of what to pack the next day. At 2:47 in the morning, the front door opened. He walked in, laughing, phone lighting his face like a private constellation. He saw me standing there in the hallway, and for a moment I thought he'd drop the smile, apologize, tell me the truth. Instead, he shrugged and said, "You're up?" "You're smiling at your phone," I said. He smiled wider, a shield. "Oh, come on. Just Jess. She's being hilarious." He walked past me and toward the bedroom. He didn't seem drunk, just buoyant. He slid under the covers and slept like someone with nothing to hide. I lay awake and listened to his breath until dawn, the hum of the city washing the apartment in pale blue. The sound of his sleep was the same as it always had been. The shape of the apartment hadn't changed. Only my place inside it had. Packing took on a rhythm after that. A book here, a mug there, the small things that make a house yours. I called a friend to help me move a few heavy boxes, and he agreed without hesitation, because friends see what their friends don't always admit to themselves. When I thought of telling Ethan, I imagined the argument, the pleas, the accusations. I imagined my voice small again, so I kept the plan to myself. On the evening of the 22nd, I printed extra labels, drank too much coffee, and folded my childhood blanket, putting it gently into a box labeled bedroom. Sometimes the act of packing felt like forgiveness, an acknowledgement that this place had once held joy, even if it would no longer. When I slid the lease termination into my bag, the envelope crinkled like a quiet promise. I'd decided I would tell him the weekend before the move. Not to hurt him, but because silence had its own cruelty. I wanted the freedom to leave my clothes in the closet and know they were mine to take. I wanted to walk away without being gaslit into staying. The apartment hummed around me. Fridge, pipes, the faint noise of a late-night show on the television in our neighbor's window. Outside, the city moved along, indifferent and endless. I placed a final book into its box, taped it up, and looked at the small army of packed boxes like footprints leading away. I folded the last label and wrote the address of the new place. It felt small when I said it out loud, 12A Maple Street. But it sounded like a sentence I'd finally learned to speak for myself. By March 29th, the apartment was half empty, half memory. The walls were bare, pale squares where frames had hung. Every sound seemed to echo. My footsteps, the click of the light switch, the slow sigh of the heating system. It was strange how the absence of clutter made everything louder. Ethan hadn't noticed much, or maybe he pretended not to. When he did glance around, he'd say things like, "Are you finally decluttering? Nice, the place looks bigger," and I'd nod, pretending it was just spring cleaning. He'd been different lately, softer in tone, more attentive in fragments. He made breakfast twice that week, texted "thinking of you" in the middle of the day, something he hadn't done in months. But I recognized the pattern. It was the same warmth that always came after distance, the brief thaw before another frost. I'd fallen for it before. I wasn't going to again. On the 30th, he brought home a bottle of wine. "Friday night, you, me, no work talk," he said, setting it down with a smile that almost looked like the one I used to know. Part of me wanted to believe him, that maybe there was still something left worth rescuing. But another part, the quieter, steadier one, knew this was the final calm before I closed the door. I agreed anyway. We ate takeout. We laughed a little, the mechanical kind of laughter that comes from nostalgia rather than joy. He told me about a new case he'd been assigned, and I nodded in all the right places. When he poured me another glass, I caught him watching me, like he was trying to read the distance in my eyes. "You've been quiet lately," he said, swirling his wine. "Just tired," I replied. "From work?" "From everything." He tilted his head, curious, cautious. "You're not thinking of leaving, are you?" There it was, that sudden flash of awareness, like lightning. I met his gaze and smiled faintly. "Should I be?" He laughed, but it came out brittle. "No, of course not. He hesitated, eyes darting briefly toward his phone as it buzzed face down on the table. I didn't look at it. I didn't need to. That night, after he fell asleep, I sat on the couch with the light off and scrolled through listings for moving trucks. I booked one for 9 a.m., April 1st. I stared at the confirmation email until the letters blurred. Then I closed my laptop and whispered to the empty room, "You're almost free." The day it happened, Sunday, March 31st, the last full day. Morning light spilled across the floor, bright and cold. I woke before Ethan, made coffee, and stood at the window, watching the city hum awake. He came out of the bedroom, hair messy, eyes half open. "You're up early," he murmured. "Couldn't sleep." He kissed my temple absently, then went to the bathroom. I noticed his phone on the counter, screen lighting up again and again with a single name, S. Not Sam, not Jess, just an initial. My stomach didn't twist this time. There was no shock, only confirmation. I sipped my coffee and thought about the boxes in the closet, the new keys in my purse, the quiet apartment waiting for me across town. He came out 10 minutes later, hair damp, expression unreadable. "You're being weird again," he said. I looked at him, steady. "Weird how?" "Like you're waiting for something." "I am," I said softly. "For tomorrow." He frowned, confused, then let it go. He grabbed his coat, said he was meeting a friend for brunch, and left. The moment the door clicked shut, I exhaled, long, steady, like something I'd been holding for years. Then I went to work. Box by box, drawer by drawer. By the time the afternoon sun tilted through the blinds, the apartment looked like a skeleton of what it once was. The air smelled of cardboard and dust. At 6:30, my phone buzzed. "Ethan, running late, don't wait up." I didn't reply. Instead, I took a final walk through each room, the kitchen where we'd burned pancakes and pretended to laugh about it, the hallway where we once kissed just because we passed each other, the bedroom where I'd learned to measure silence like a language. Then I placed my copy of the keys on the counter beside a folded note. It wasn't angry, just true. I signed the termination. I found a new place. "You said I was controlling, but all I ever wanted was clarity. You wanted space, and I'm giving it to you, permanently. Please don't call. I won't be answering." I set it there and stood for a while, watching the sunlight move across the counter until it reached the edge of the paper. Then I picked up my bag, closed the door behind me, and didn't look back. He called 7 times, then 12, then from another number. I didn't answer any of them. The text came next. "Where are you? You can't just leave like that. We should talk." Each one a little more frantic, a little less controlled. When he finally stopped, I let the quiet settle around me like a new kind of peace. The new apartment was small, but it was mine. The walls were blank, waiting. The air smelled faintly of paint and eucalyptus from the candle I'd bought on the way there. I unpacked one box at a time, slow and deliberate. That night, lying on the mattress on the floor, I checked my email one last time. Among the usual newsletters and bills, there was one new message. Subject, lease refund, sent. From Mr. Ellis. I smiled, the kind of small, private smile that feels earned. I closed my laptop, turned off the lamp, and let the dark fill the room. Outside, the city was still moving. Same hum, same rhythm, but it no longer sounded like something I needed to escape from. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't waiting for someone to come home. I already was.